Hi, and welcome to Politics After Dark. I'm Mike O'Connell, editor of Binghamton Review, and your host. Join me for a half hour of music, humor, politics, and a few surprises. Sometimes, even for me. Politics After Dark is a look at political issues and questions, local, national, and on the campus of Binghamton University. Coming to you from my house. Right now you're listening to the Oscar Peterson Trio. That's Oscar Peterson on piano, Ray Brown on bass, and Ed Thigpen on drums. The name of the tune is Just in Time, from the Oscar Peterson Trio's album, A Jazz Portrait of Frank Sinatra. Recorded in 1959, featured a dozen tunes, originally made famous by the chairman of the board. In my opinion, it's one of the finest jazz albums available, and one of the greatest tributes to the man known as the voice that thrilled millions, Old Blue Eyes, the man who redefined popular song, Frank Sinatra. This is the premiere broadcast of Politics After Dark. I'd like to tell you a little bit about myself before we get too far into the issues. As I said, my name is Mike O'Connell. I'm a graduate student at Binghamton University in the Masters in Public Administration program. I'm a native of Binghamton, New York, a graduate of Binghamton High School, and a graduate of Binghamton University. That's somewhat rare in these parts. I'm also editor of Binghamton Review, a campus journal, the only outlet for right-wing thought on the campus of Binghamton University, and the only right-wing newsletter in Binghamton, Greater Binghamton, and the Southern Tier. Joining me on the show today is former managing editor of Binghamton Review. He's taken a brief respite from his duties with the Review to run for student body president at Binghamton University. My good friend, Leonini. Come on out, Louis.
Pleasure to be here, Mike.
Good to have you on the show. You're welcome anytime. I can say at this point that you have been on every broadcast of Politics After Dark.
I have, as a matter of fact. But then again, that doesn't mean much.
Yeah, that's right, because this is the first broadcast.
Very good.
And I was just thinking that you were the last guest on my radio show, and now here you are, the first guest on my television show.
A bridge builder, if ever there was one.
You're a bridge builder from me, from the world
Tell Joe Sanfilippo.
of radio to the world of television, and assisting me with the magazine along the way.
Which is my favorite part, of course.
Oh, mine too, naturally. But sometimes I like to step out in front of the camera. And I'm glad to have you on the show today. I want to get into some issues, starting at the state level. Recently, the State Comptroller General's Office, Alan Hevesy and his staff have put together a report that's critical of the Empire Zone program. Now, the Empire Zone program is Governor Pataki's initiative. That's a tax incentive program to businesses in areas which are poverty-stricken, have high unemployment, general economic distress. There are 72 such zones in New York State, and in these areas, if businesses qualify and agree to create jobs, that I can see that I've raised a bit of an ire when I mentioned creating jobs. We'll get to that in a moment.
Yes.
But the short of it is that these businesses agree to create jobs, and they receive either tax breaks or they have their utility bills paid, or their phone bills.
Corporate welfare on a small business scale.
Well, we'll be getting into corporate welfare. Now,
okay.
the Hevesy report, and Alan Hevesy is a Democrat, criticizing Republican George Pataki's program,
right.
Has looked at some of these businesses, and it turns out that only about 30% of the businesses actually met their goals for creating jobs. There's that word again. Creating jobs, and actually ended up costing the taxpayers of New York State quite a bit of money. Now, the Hevesy report looks at the problem of these businesses, that it suggests that there wasn't enough management, there wasn't enough oversight. It almost implies that they need to crack down on these businesses more. Now, you seem to be shaking your head at that. I'd be interested to hear your opinions, not as a Democrat or a Republican, but as
a sound-minded right-wing individual.
As a sound-minded right-wing individual.
Well, being well-versed in economics,
which is always a help.
Yes. See, to me, when you have a program like this, I like to see programs like this fail. To me, even if 50% of the businesses were able to create jobs by sprinkling magic job dust everywhere as they see fit, it would still be a failure as a program, because what you're doing is you're taking money from legitimate business areas like, say, Main Street or downtown or wherever, where businesses actually are opening up without such help, and you're putting a strain on them for the purpose of having businesses in these empire zones. So what you're doing is you're not so much creating jobs, you're redistributing jobs, as I've heard you talk about at City Council.
Sure, because you're redistributing cost is what happens.
And you're raising the taxes for so many more people than you are lowering taxes for, and it just doesn't seem to me as if this is actually a good program. Now, so on the face of it, I believe, well, this is great, now the Empire Zone is being criticized, and it does give me some red meat when I want to criticize the Empire Zone, say at a City Council meeting, or when I'm talking to my parents.
Sure, I love criticizing the Empire Zone program, too.
And so it does, in a sense, give us that red meat, but in another sense, you have to understand where the criticism is coming from, and you alluded to this. He wants to see even more social engineering, and I just don't see that as the answer.
Yeah, the problem is that the Hevesy report suggests that the solution to this problem is keeping a greater eye on these businesses. And,
disagree. Sorry.
I'm tempted to agree with you and disagree with the report, and I also do not favor the Empire Zone program because, as you were saying, it doesn't cut the cost. It cuts the cost of these businesses. It just shifts them to existing businesses,
right?
And general taxpayers like you and me, who are unfortunate enough to live in New York State and
yes,
have to
pay 90% of our income.
As
the folks, I'm sure know.
I'm sure that comes to as surprise to no one who may be watching.
Not really 90, but you get the point. It's very high.
It's up there. It's
even for socialist states, we rank one of the highest.
We may have just eclipsed Massachusetts actually as the highest taxed
under
state.
A Republican governor, no less.
Strangely enough.
Yes.
But yeah, that's something.
And a Republican Senate.
That's something that I have spoken about.
There are no Republicans in New York State.
Yeah, I've often thought that New York State could really benefit from forming a Republican Party.
Oh yes, absolutely. I think that it's about time that we have a Republican Party in New York.
William F. Buckley tried that in about the mid-1960s, and he ran for mayor of New York City, I believe, in 1965 on a Republican platform. He didn't win, I don't think, but yeah, I was
not surprised.
I always thought that New York State could really benefit from having a Republican Party, because at the state level and I think here locally, we see even Republican legislators acting in manners which I would not describe as very big R Republican.
It wouldn't even make them a good Democrat.
No, because
sometimes when you see these things happen on the Democratic side, you say, well, okay, he's a good Democrat, but you still won't vote for him. This goes beyond bad Republican, good Democrat. This is just bad. This is as bad as a Democrat could be, some of these things that they're proposing. And Empire zones?
I think sometimes that Democrats are at least honest about it.
Yeah, they believe in social engineering.
They are at least honest about what I see mainly as socialist, or what I've referred to in the past as governmentarian tendencies of both political parties.
Yes. I saw that in the review once.
Yeah, I think I read that in Binghamton Review. The true difference between ideologies in this world is not Republican, Democrat. It's not fascist, communist. It's not socialist, anarchist. It's those who favor the government as a means for effecting social and economic change, and those who favor individual initiative as a means for effecting social and economic change. And the problem is that the people who are in government and the people who look to move into government are decidedly of one and not the other.
And also what I see is the Republicans will try and mask it. They'll say, well, we're trying to encourage individual initiative. So they use the word individual, yet they're still using perverted government programs to try and do what they think is going to encourage some individual.
Right.
Whereas the Democrats will actually say, no, this is government sanctioned, we are going to do this, this, and that.
Yeah. As I
It has
said,
nothing to do with individuals, we just think the government should do it.
as I said, they're at least honest about it.
Right.
We've also heard Republicans many times in the past as being pro-business. Now, some people shudder at the term pro-business. I look at it from a little bit different perspective. You can look at something like the Empire Zone program. You could say that that is pro-business. Well, it helps businesses. It helps certain businesses.
Yes.
The problem is that most people who are pro-business favor lessened government restriction on business for everyone else.
But when it comes to their business,
For their own business, they
want
want
these special
certain
privileges.
protectionist matters, and we see that in the Empire Zone, that these businesses are helped, but it comes at the cost of all other businesses.
which is not very pro-business.
No, ironically, it is not.
Right.
It doesn't
So
help.
wouldn't it be better then to say that you're pro-free enterprise?
I would favor something like a politician who claimed to be pro-free enterprise and was at least consistent about it
Right.
among all businesses and among all industries. One of the great problems in public policy is that we see concentrated benefits, which are direct and obvious,
Mhm.
and dispersed cost,
Yeah.
which are not so obvious and they're much well hidden.
Right.
If you, and again we see this as human beings, they tend to be producers of one good or two goods, and they're consumers of all goods. If they see
Right.
the price of
Right.
the product they produce drop, that hits them a lot more than the other side of that, which is the cost of other products. Maybe you pay a few cents more here, you pay a few cents more there, you don't realize it.
You're
But-
preaching to the choir here. I guess
If-
I was a good first guest on your show.
If you add it all up, sure. Well, I wanted someone who would agree with me largely, but I wanted to get back to the Empire Zone program though,
Mhm.
because this is something which it's going to come up, and you had sort of alluded to maybe some political maneuvering by Alan Hevesy. Could we possibly see Alan Hevesy running for governor at some time?
I think that he sees no other avenue at this point. He is not very well liked in the New York City Democratic arena. We're talking about a guy, when he was state legislator, wanted to legalize pot. Now, you can make a libertarian argument for that. However, the way that he was doing it was so aggressive that it turned off people in his own party and some legitimate cultural conservatives in the Republican Party. He is not somebody who is very well liked in New York City, and he's seen as a pseudo-conservative, actually, interestingly enough.
You're speaking now as our resident person of New York City.
Yes, I am originally from Staten Island, the fifth borough of New York City.
I've heard
Interestingly enough,
I've heard that Staten Island wants to secede. How's that coming along?
well, it's not coming along very well, but that's also because Mayor Rudy Giuliani was able to persuade most Staten Island residents that that was not the right idea. You have to understand, I mean, Staten Island wanted to secede at a time when New York City was so radically left-wing, and Staten Island, for all intents and purposes, is a very right-wing county, Richmond County. So they were not getting, they were paying the most taxes, getting the least amount of social service, and they figured, well, if we're paying this much for it, we might as well have it.
Right, they were the losers in the deal.
We were definitely the losers in the deal, so many people were moving out of the county, and it was the fastest growing county in New York State. So they figured it would be a good idea to keep them in the city, to keep the taxes there. So he assuaged, whatever the word is, to the local politicians not to do that very thing. Now, when you have somebody like Alan Hevesy, who is a Democrat that many people don't like, where do you go as comptroller? You do have a statewide reputation. I could see himself trying to maneuver, because he has no shame, even though he lost the Democratic nomination for mayor, I could see him trying to maneuver himself to another statewide position. Maybe not governor, but something. Maybe attorney general, because we all know Elliot Spitzer has his eyes on the governorship.
I was going to ask you that next. That
Yes.
Here's another gentleman who may have his eyes on the gubernatorial race, and that is Elliot Spitzer.
Elliot Spitzer.
Now, Elliot Spitzer was on the campus of Binghamton University a couple months ago. I missed that presentation, unfortunately, but I think you were there.
I attended. I had to for class.
You had to for class.
Yes.
I'm sure you enjoyed it. Now, tell me a little about what Elliot Spitzer.
Well, in between the times when I was talking to the girl next to me and when I was sleeping, I did actually hear some of the things he had to say.
You caught a few of the words among those two very important activities. So.
Actually, yeah, he talked a lot about creating jobs.
It seems to be a buzzword of both Democrats and Republicans.
Unfortunately, it is, yes. They both have the idea that they have that power, which is scary. The last time I heard about that was in the Great Leap Forward in the 5-year plans of Stalin. However, yeah, he was talking about corporate corruption, and I was in a class, Markets, Ethics, and Law. Now, that's the reason I had to go to the lecture. He was speaking to the corporate corruption of certain people breaking various laws. What he failed to mention, however, was that, yeah, okay, they broke laws. That means that the laws are already on the books, and we caught them. So what's the problem? Now, he wants to take you to a world, little Spitzerville, we'll call it, where everybody has to not just pay for their crime, but pay their salary to the state. Now, he made this big deal about Dick Grasso stepping down as New York Stock Exchange chairman, I believe, was his position. Okay. For what? What did he do besides accept a very large paycheck? That's all he did.
There are a lot of people in the world who make more money than I think they deserve, but if you're not breaking any laws...
Exactly. Now, Elliot Spitzer's point, now, he spoke at least a half an hour about this, about how, Dick Grasso, he really needs to not make so much money. Did he vote for it? Was he able to determine his own salary? No, the New York Stock Exchange awarded him this money, and he cashed the check. He cashed a check! Oh, no. And, I mean, this is the sort of thing which gets lost on most people, because they'll say, yeah, Dick Grasso does make too much money. But how do you stop him from making so much money unless you accept that the state has such a role in the private sector to prevent him from making such money? I'm sorry, that scares me.
How do you stop a guy like Alex Rodriguez from making a lot of money? I mean,
unless you regulate it. And regulation, as we see in China, Russia, and other socialist enterprises, it just doesn't work.
I think it was...
Why do we accept it in this country?
I think it was Huey Long, a senator from Louisiana, who suggested having a maximum income in the United States. This was towards the end of the Depression, I guess, just before World War II. And Franklin Roosevelt started to go along with this. I believe it was something like $260,000, which was a lot of money back then. But
well, he was being influenced by his kitchen cabinet of left-wing professors. I mean, let's face it.
There would have been a maximum salary in the United States.
Can you imagine?
Actually, with how things have gone the past 60 years or so since then,
Good point.
I actually can imagine it. But I mean, take someone like Alex Rodriguez, who I'm happy to say now is on our side.
Right. Yes.
He's our guy now. But I mean, the man makes a lot of money. But the question that I think we have to ask ourselves is not, is it fair that Alex Rodriguez makes a lot of money? Of course it's unfair that he makes $25 million a year and I make, well, significantly less than $25 million a year.
Is it not what the market will provide?
Yeah. The
People
question
go and
is,
see those games.
which is less fair? Is it less fair just to Alex Rodriguez, or would it be less fair that all the people who watch Alex Rodriguez would be denied that enjoyment? There are millions of people who enjoy watching Alex Rodriguez play the game of baseball.
I'm willing to pay.
I'm one of them. And, I mean, the answer always is, if you're wondering why certain individuals make so much money in the private sector, why they make so much money, well, if you're looking for whose fault that is, take a look in the mirror. If we weren't willing to pay Alex Rodriguez so much money, he wouldn't make that much money. And I doubt he would subject himself to the kinds of physical rigor he has to go through on a daily basis for, the average wage of a dock worker. So the question is really not what's fair and what's not fair, but which is more fair, and or which is more unfair, really. I think it would be more unfair to deny millions of people the pleasure of watching Alex Rodriguez play the game of baseball.
Sure. I mean, these people scream and yell about how it's unfair, unfair, unfair. Okay. Thanks for pointing out that things are unfair. Now, what are you going to do about it?
The only really...
They scream and scream as if something should be done. But who's going to do something? Government? I don't think so. If anything should be done, don't go see those games. You have every right not to pay the ticket price.
You can...
Oh, well, the ticket prices are so high. Well, should they regulate the ticket prices?
Yeah.
Yes. No. They should. You just don't buy the ticket. If enough people don't buy tickets, the ticket price goes down.
Exactly. It always fascinates me.
Market economics.
That,
Boy.
that people complain about the insanely high prices of professional sporting events.
Right, absolutely.
Sure. How can anyone possibly afford that? How can anyone afford to go to professional baseball games?
And yet,
when I turn on the TV,
people
somehow, amazingly, I see 50,000 people sitting there who were able to figure it out somehow. They were able to
They sold their lunch to the bully, and they got
this obviously, or they made a pact with the devil or something that they were able to go to this game.
Now they must know the mayor.
Yeah, they know Mike Bloomberg.
Right.
What I'm looking at though is that it's only 50,000 people. Only 50,000 can go to this game. Not everyone can go in, and we have to set some price to prevent just people taking over the stadium. But I think our wealth, specifically technology, has allowed us, a greater number of people, to view the game of baseball. I'm looking at radio and television right now.
Some games are better off on television because they're so boring. You want to get up and get some more chips.
Yeah, and you really have a much more comfortable seat when you're sitting in your living room watching television, as I'm sure our audience is realizing right now. Though I'm sure there are many people who would want to jump up on stage with us right now.
Well, this is a very enviable position right here. I mean, we're in an undisclosed location. Well, actually, it has been disclosed that this is your house.
Yeah.
In front of a very nice fireplace.
Yes, I appreciate
some old school curtains.
The decor, and I put a lot of thought into it. But I'm sure there are people who are either screaming at their television set right now, screaming agreeing with us, or screaming disagreeing with us.
Mm-hmm. But that is sort of the point.
You and I are the only people who are on this show right now. But yeah, it baffles me the complete misunderstanding that our American electorate has of economics.
It really shouldn't even be debatable. No. Wouldn't it be nice if we can, use our time to talk to other things that are actually more important than actually try and argue over some of the basic things that should be taken as givens in our argument of politics?
Absolutely. We should be talking about music and girls and the meaning of life and other such important things, but here we are trying to
And yet we're engaged in this battle on the Binghamton University campus, as you know, with Binghamton Review. We have to argue some of the most basic things about economics, some of the most basic things about personal motivation and individual initiative. These sorts of things weren't even issues before this whole hippie movement. And now they're in charge of the university campus, which is scary.
Yeah, that scares me.
Yeah, it really does scare me. I mean, you have people like Lois DeFleur that are trying to tame the beastly attitudes of students who want to smoke or do other things. And it really misses the point because we really, like I said, should be taking certain things for granted, like individual initiative and its power to create social change, rather than the government.
It's what made this country what it is. If you look at the development of this nation, from a small pioneering country with a small number of citizens to the world's great industrial power,
right.
Our success did not come by ceding more and more power to government and allowing government to plan and design. Our success came from giving individuals the initiative to do that for themselves.
One of the things I always like to bring up to these people, say, okay, yeah, you're right. You know what? The government should have a role in the lives of people beyond what is normally the governmental role. I mean, just look at libraries. Oh wait, those were donated by the private sector. Yeah, Andrew Carnegie.
Largely. Who donated the library here, actually?
He did, and then they decided to move the building to another place to build this 21st century, piece of junk. I don't understand that.
One of the most beautiful buildings in all of Binghamton.
I say we make it a nightclub.
That thought has occurred to me, but now it is lying empty now. One of the most beautiful.
Is it for sale?
I believe it is for sale. Yes.
What a shame.
Yeah, one of the most beautiful buildings in Binghamton is that old library building on Exchange Street. It's beautiful on the inside, cathedral ceilings, and this marble structures.
But so that the government could show that it's doing something, and though it scares me when I see the government doing something, but...
Yeah, I would rather the government do less.
nothing.
Yeah.
Or, okay, less, not nothing. I mean, we do want the government to...
Strangely enough, we do need government for certain things.
Unfortunately, it's...
laws against, murder and arson and such things. We do,
right,
we do need government when there are third-party effects.
But don't you think that, I mean...
I never answer questions to start with, don't you think?
Very good point. No, but it's complimentary to you, so you might still answer.
Oh, please, continue. I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Well, when government... People expect government to have unlimited resources. So they say, you know what, you should build a bridge and put a bunch of lights on it so that it looks really good at night. And you should do all these little, put red mulch and plants and redo the sidewalk and then break it because something happened. I don't know if you saw that, but on the bridge they broke the sidewalk and then they had to tar it over. So all the brand new work that's only 2 years old has been destroyed. Side story. They expect city council and city government to have unlimited resources, and then they do these sorts of things, and then they say, gee, we don't have enough police protection, which is a legitimate role of government, especially at the local level. But they don't understand that this diverting of resources to putting lights on a bridge is taking money from the legitimate roles of local government. So local government is hamstrung.
It's a fungibility issue, to throw in another economics term. When you take money away from one sector, or you put money to one sector, that's necessarily taking money away from another sector. It's amazing to me, two things. One is that, I'm not the first to come up with this. This was actually, Milton Friedman talked about this for about half a century. That it was amazing. It was amazing that in the early years of this country, governments were able to build roads, bridges, and other means of public infrastructure when public spending was a tiny fraction of what it is today. And today, when government's taking in a lot more money, it can't even maintain roads.
Yes.
Before we were building them, now we can't even maintain them. The problem with government, and you were speaking to this a minute ago, that certain people, they want their pet issues.
Yes.
The problem with, and again, it comes back to, you have to look at yourself in the mirror, because we're all asking the same things. We're demanding the impossible task of government, and that is that we want government to spend other people's money on us without spending any of our money on anyone else.
That's a very dangerous game to play.
It is, and unfortunately that is the task we have demanded of government for years. And
it seems as if it's not going anywhere.
The nice thing, though, is that it gives people like you and me the opportunity to write about and talk about political issues on a somewhat regular basis.
And make light of them, of course, because we all know that only right-wingers have a sense of humor.
Of course, of course. You and I both realize that, because I've said this before, that if your aim in life, if the way you look at life is that the world is going to hell in a handbasket, well, how can you have a sense of humor about that?
Right, I mean, you're always sad.
Yeah. It's really disappointing.
It makes sense to hold up stupid signs and throw ketchup on your shirt and have a die-in.
As amusing as that would be, and as much as I would like to extend this conversation until the wee hours in the morning, I can see that our half hour is just about up. Louis, I thank you for being on the show today.
It was my pleasure.
You know you are always welcome.
Thank you very much.
And I'm sure you'll be on again. And I think now we're going to be heading back to the sounds of the Oscar Peterson Trio, if I get the CD player working again. And join us next time on
Salute.
Politics After Dark. Good night.